Who knew a small creature from the Dark Continent would attract them to the city so soon? They're getting careless after getting away with all their crimes. This mansion wasn't too expensive. We don't have to hold back when we fight. Don't make too much noise. The visitors in the city don't know much about our organization, and we should keep it that way. The two treasure hunters left their rooms without a sound. They reached out with their auras and found the intruder in the garden. His cultivation was nothing special. After jumping over the fence, the bodyguard didn't find anyone in the courtyard. He sneaked towards the room closest to him. When he pushed open the door and crept inside, the doors and windows slammed shut and glowed with a golden seal. The two treasure hunters emerged from the darkness. You're brave for barging in here in the middle of the night. No one has ever stolen a treasure from us and gotten away alive. The bodyguard's eyes were glassy. He didn't feel negative emotions like fear and panic. He was overwhelmed with the impulse to kill. He drew his sword and charged fearlessly at the two men in front of him. A torrent of energy engulfed the room, but the golden seals on the doors and windows contained the destruction. Members of the treasure hunter organization weren't reckless fighters. They usually waited for their opponent to reveal an opening before dealing a fatal blow. The two treasure hunters circled the room, leaving faint afterimages behind them. When the bodyguard charged again, two streaks of energy weaved through the room and bound him tightly. Suddenly, his skin burst into flames, and two swords shot out of his arms. Stephen was standing by the window, staring at the room on the first floor where the fight was taking place. The Sky Lion and the other beasts were next to him. I sense a strong aura coming from that room. Should we help them? The Sky Lion asked. The treasure hunters sealed the room with a raise, Stephen replied. They don't want outsiders interfering. If the room weren't sealed, the powerful fluctuations in energy would have attracted the city guard's attention the moment the battle started. Fighting was prohibited in the cities, and the treasure hunters didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to themselves. The dull sound of fighting inside the room stopped, and the array vanished. Stephen jumped out the window just as the treasure hunters walked out. What happened? Someone trespassed. He was probably here to steal the creature from the Dark Continent. He was controlled by another cultivator. When we caught him, his captor destroyed his spiritual world and killed him. Stephen glanced through the crack in the door. There was nothing but debris in the room. The body was nowhere to be found. The two treasure hunters were exceptionally efficient. Should we look for the thief? It's not necessary. You should go back to bed. The culprit will show themselves when the exhibition starts. Naderun was waiting in an inconspicuous restaurant. He opened his eyes when the bodyguard died. He'd attached his spiritual energy to the bodyguard and saw the entire fight. Even with assistance, the treasure hunters were formidable. They were much stronger than expected. Naderun couldn't steal the treasure from them, and they probably wouldn't be swayed by money either. The organization claimed to be holding an exhibition, not an auction. Maybe they had no plans to sell the treasure. He decided to wait for the mercenaries to arrive before discussing what to do next. 2 days later, the Lord of Abysm City invited Stephen to his mansion. Vince was there, along with a small group of loyal and trustworthy subordinates. There are 2 main reasons we're holding an exhibition, Vince said. The first is to lure the ancient cultivators to the city. In case they don't show up, we'll still have an opportunity to persuade the wealthy families to invest in our project. This is our second reason, and it ensures that we won't be wasting our time. There's no harm in being prepared, the city lord added. You never know what might happen. There's actually a lot of cultivators interested in the Dark Continent. It's just that there's no safe route to get there. After the bridge is built, there could be more visitors than expected. Stephen listened as he downed a glass of wine. He was more concerned about the ancient cultivators than the Dark Continent right now. I hope things go well at the exhibition. I did agree to invest $300 billion, and that's only if we succeed in catching the ancient cultivators. When you're searching for potential investors, don't hesitate to overshoot your target. The more investments you have, the better. The city lord raised his glass with a tense smile. I understand. We've sent information on the ancient cultivators to the city guards. They're on the lookout for anyone suspicious. We'll track them down soon. The survival of Abysm City depended on Stephen's investment. Not just anyone could have $300 billion to waste. Only the tycoons who monopolize certain industries would have such generous financial resources. As the days passed, Abysm City became livelier. Performances, parades, and festive decorations were everywhere in the city. The city lord had arranged these festivities in hopes that the visitors would stay after the exhibition. The exhibition venue set up outside the city was quite luxurious. There were 3 layers of security personnel and metallic pillars spread throughout the venue. The pillars were the latest product Stephen's team of researchers had developed. There were crystals inside, and in emergencies, beams of energy would be released at the enemy. 20 days passed in a flash, and soon it was the day of the exhibition. The city lord and Vince arrived at the venue early to take on their roles as hosts. Compared to their suits and leather shoes, Stephen was dressed more casually. He blended into the crowd with the beasts in human form. "Thank you all for taking the time to visit Abyssum City. We guarantee that our exhibition will be an eye-opener for everyone. Without further ado, let's begin." The staff placed heavy boxes on the table and went through several verification procedures before they could be opened. The treasures inside were all collected by the treasure hunters. Vince gave a short description of each treasure as they were revealed to the audience. There were shells that contained a spatial storage, dust that could seal a cultivator's senses, leaves that would change the color of skin to blend into the environment, wind chimes that affected mental energy, and skulls that could separate the soul from the body. Many of the treasures were unusual items. They weren't weapons, but if used correctly, they could give a cultivator the upper hand in battle. The strange creature from the Dark Continent was the finale. The staff placed the wooden box with the creature inside on the table in front of Vince. He gave a passionate introduction and followed up with a demonstration. Vince opened the box, and the creature floated in the air. It wasn't sentient, nor did it give off a special aura. The staff threw blades of energy at it, but it wasn't affected. The energy bounced off its fleshy exterior as it continued to expand and contract. The staff condensed a phantom of a wolf. It bared its fangs and swallowed the creature whole. Minutes later, the wolf began to fade, as if its energy was being drained. It disappeared, leaving the creature hovering in the air, intact without a scratch. "How is it doing that?" Stephen asked the threadworms beside him. "Is it a beast?" When have you ever seen a beast that looks like a lump of flesh? It's probably some kind of life form without intelligence unique to the Dark Continent. Just as the creature was about to attack the staff, Vince condensed a barrier of energy around it and moved it back to the table. The barrier dispersed, and the creature obediently returned to the box. Vince explained to the audience that if the creature managed to stick on to someone's skin, it would invade their body, turn them into an existence similar to its own, and absorb them into its flesh. The creature was effective against indestructible bodies. Murmurs sounded from the audience. The creature was a simple and effective way to assassinate an enemy. If they could purchase a sample of it and bring it back for research, this trip wouldn't be in vain. Nader Run's team was watching from the edge of the crowd. The creature was as fearsome as the treasure hunters had claimed. "If our enemies get their hands on that thing, we'll be in trouble. Many of the wealthy families we stole from are here. The hosts haven't said that this is an auction. They might not be planning to sell it." Nader Run led his team to the lounge behind the stage. If the treasure wasn't sold, then it would be stored in the back with the rest. Their best chance to steal it would be at the end of the exhibition. The treasure hunters weren't easy to kill. It would be simpler to steal the creature when no one was looking. Several impatient visitors in the audience voiced their complaints. "Stop beating around the bush. We didn't come all the way here to watch a demonstration. Are you going to sell your treasures or not?" The rest of the audience was in agreement. They were all wealthy members of society. They were eager to bid in an auction for the treasure they wanted. The Lord of Abyssum City picked up the microphone and introduced the city's new project. "The Dark Continent is a mysterious region beyond the domains. We're planning on constructing a bridge for safe passage. Those who are interested in investing are welcome to bid on any treasure displayed today. They will also have an opportunity to follow the treasure hunters into the Dark Continent for a short exploration." It didn't take a genius to understand what the city lord was trying to say. There was no difference between purchasing treasures directly or investing before purchasing. They'd be spending money either way. The city lord left out the astronomical sum of 800 billion. He was worried that the shocking amount would scare the potential investors away. His goal was only 1 billion in investments by the end of the exhibition. The exhibition went on for another 2 hours before concluding in a grand manner. The visitors were invited to a celebration at a luxury hotel. All expenses would be paid by the city lord. As the crowd dispersed, the threadworms told Stephen that their clones had found a suspicious individual near the lounge who they suspected was part of Nader Run's team. Stephen didn't have time to search for the treasure hunters or city guards, so he transmitted his voice to Ren's students nearby, who were also attending the exhibition. After evolution, the threadworm's abilities had improved. No one had noticed their tiny clones burrowing through the soil beneath their feet, not even Nadorun's team. They were alarmed when the city guards surrounded the lounge. How did they know we were here? Stephen's in the crowd. He set us up. Don't panic. The staff already moved the treasures somewhere else. They aren't planning to use that creature against us. When they stood up, silver chains broke through the ground and bound their ankles. The threadworms had condensed them using their iron sand. Stephen appeared behind Nadorun's team and swung his sword with a force that could split mountains. Nadorun's team reacted quickly, and they blocked Stephen's sword with their own weapons. Stephen created 3 clones who didn't hesitate to join the fray. The threadworm's chains were still tightly wrapped around the ancient cultivator's ankles. While Stephen's clones were distracting them, he sliced 2 of them in the calves with his sword. Their movements were restricted, and even if they saw the attack coming, they couldn't dodge completely. The 2 injured members of Nadorun's team gritted their teeth and threw a ball of energy at Stephen, enveloping him in an explosion of flames. At the last second, he summoned a phantom of the fire phoenix. It wrapped around him, warding off the explosion. The 2 ancient cultivators were about to attack again when the negative energy that had invaded their bodies took effect. Their skin turned gray with spiderweb-shaped cracks, like a mottled wall that had been weathered by wind and frost. Their teeth and nails elongated and sharpened, their pupils turned red, and their joints became stiff. Nadorun felt a rare sense of dread well up inside him. The indestructible bodies that their team were so proud of were useless in the face of a weapon tainted with negative energy. Be careful! Don't let a sword graze you! Nadorun and the remaining members of his team ran in the opposite direction just as Emmett, Seth, and Ren's other students finished setting up an array in the air. The array was rapidly absorbing spiritual energy from the surroundings. When it reached the threshold, it would release the energy at Nadorun's team. Nadorun looked up at the glowing array spanning in the sky. He was furious. Back when he was still a member of the Mystic Covenant, these people hadn't joined the faction yet. Where did they get the courage to attack them? Emmett and Seth pointed their swords at the ground. The array shone brighter. A pillar of light struck Nadorun's team like a meteor, but it didn't stop there. Amidst the repeated shockwaves, a vortex of light continued to absorb spiritual energy, this time from Nadorun's team. Vince arrived with a crowd of treasure hunters. Your heads are worth a large sum. Just how many crimes have you committed to have so many bounties with your names on them? Nadorun motioned for his team to stay off the ground to avoid the vortex. We've never interfered with each other's business. Why are you coming after us now? You provoked us first, Vince said matter-of-factly. You tried to steal our treasures at the mansion. Your bodies may be indestructible, but the Dark Continent is thousands of times more dangerous than you. At Vince's signal, the treasure hunters lunged for Nadorun's team. They were so fast that their figures blurred. Stephen wanted to join the battle to settle their grudges once and for all, but a gust of wind from their attacks almost knocked him off his feet. The threadworms condensed a layer of iron sand over his skin. Don't be so reckless, and watch from here. They can handle it. The treasure hunters took out strange weapons like nets, cages, chains, and beast traps. From the looks of it, they treated the ancient cultivators like prey. Nadorun had already realized the gravity of the situation. The nets couldn't be torn, and the chains and traps automatically tracked them down. There was nowhere to run. The treasure hunters also had a lot of experience in fighting from a distance. The Dark Continent was dangerous, and charging headfirst wasn't a wise move. The treasure hunters were launching long-range attacks that stopped Nadorun's team from running, while Ren's students were draining their energy with the array. It would be over for them once their energy reserves were depleted. We need a hostage. Target Stephen, Nadorun ordered. His methods are flashy, but his true cultivation is mediocre. A group of cultivators were waiting in a small forest nearby. They were from the Mercenary Guild's alliance, and they were here to help Nadorun's team steal the creature from the Dark Continent, but the treasure hunters and city guards had found them first. Should we rescue them? Calm down. We'll be sending ourselves to our graves if we reveal our location. Maybe they'll escape on their own. They are known for their high defenses. The leader of the mercenary team shook his head. It's none of our business. Representatives from the wealthy families and martial arts factions who came to attend the exhibition are watching from the city gate. They have to stand on the side of justice when the public is involved. It's a shame we couldn't get the formula from them before they meet their end. Maybe it's a good thing. After the exhibition, the guild leaders won't be so fixated on it anymore. An indestructible body doesn't make you invincible. There are always ways to restrain a cultivator. The mercenaries headed deeper into the forest. There was no reason for them to stay. They wouldn't be able to steal the creature from the treasure hunters, and they couldn't buy it from them either. As for becoming an investor to earn the right to bid on their treasures, that was a decision the guild leaders would make after they reported the situation. When Naderun's team rushed towards Stephen, he merely swung his sword and they backed away. They were wary about being turned into walking corpses. "You're blind if you think I'm a pushover," Stephen said. The threadworms had been waiting for the chance to fight after they evolved, and they couldn't wait to test their new abilities. They were hundreds of feet long, and their enormous forms drew everyone's attention. Naderun's team sliced their scales, but they didn't leave so much as a scratch. The threadworms detached their scales and aimed at Naderun's vitals. The sheer number of scales was dazzling to the spectators. They covered the entire clearing, and Naderun was forced to deflect them with his sword. Upon collision, the force sent a numbing sensation up his arm. "I'll take too much time to get rid of his beasts. Should we target Vince instead? He has a crowd of treasure hunters around him. We'll be walking right into his trap." While Naderun's team was panicking, they didn't notice their shadows reflecting on the threadworm's scales like a mirror. Stephen was concerned when the scales burst into black flames. "What's going on? Do they use some kind of strange technique?" The threadworms reassured him. "You don't have to worry. After evolving, we gained a new set of abilities." Stephen was nervously inspecting the burning scales when the same black flames appeared on the clothes of Naderun's team. If the threadworms were in the range of their opponent's shadow, they could transmit the same damage from their scales to them. A reflection was difficult to guard against. Naderun's team sheathed their swords and roughly patted their clothes to extinguish the flames. The black fire wasn't enough to burn their indestructible bodies to ashes, but when it entered their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, their perception would be severely affected. "It's time to end this," Vince said, signaling for the treasure hunters to step in. "Your team has been on the wanted list for years. This is a suitable ending for all of you." The treasure hunters rushed over with their weapons in hand. The beast traps clamped over Naderun's team's wrists and ankles. The chains followed closely behind them and bound them in layers. Vince hadn't forgotten about their indestructible bodies. Regular fatal blows wouldn't work on them. He summoned a beast that looked like a unicorn. A stream of water shot out of its mouth and drenched Naderun's team. Vince went up to Stephen with a smile. "It's done. I hope we can start building the bridge as soon as we can." Stephen glanced at the ancient cultivators. The transparent liquid had solidified over their bodies and turned into a hard substance that looked like amber. "Money isn't an issue. What happened to them?" "An indestructible body isn't the same as never-ending vitality. The amber isolates them from the outside world and their energy will slowly drain. They'll be dead soon. We've kept their bodies intact and there won't be any questions about our contribution. We'll be able to claim the bounty's rewards as planned." This was a method Vince had frequently used to capture rare species without harming them during explorations. The crowd gathered at the city gate had just witnessed the end of an ancient cultivator with their own eyes. Most of them were here for them. Coming all the way to Abysm City had been worth it. A few days later, the blueprint of the bridge's design and construction team were ready, and the grand construction began. Many of the wealthy families had been impressed by the treasure hunters' techniques, and they made their investments one after another. Stephen paid the $300 billion he'd agreed on. It was a win-win situation for all parties involved. Stephen invited Ren's students to a high-end restaurant to treat them to a meal. The ancient cultivators had been taken care of, and he didn't have to worry about them making a mess of the human realm again. But now he had to turn his attention to other things like the Zenith Council's upcoming assessment. "It's only been a few weeks since you became the city lord. Shouldn't you manage the city yourself to prove your capabilities?" Emmett asked. "If you give us all the authority, wouldn't that be a waste of your position?" Seth added. "The Sullivan family's influence in Minori City is complicated and deeply rooted," Stephen explained. "It doesn't make a difference whether I'm personally managing the city or not." "I have nothing to say if that's what you've decided," Emmett replied. "By the way, before the ancient cultivators died, we couldn't find any evidence that they were conspiring with the Mercenary Guilds Alliance. Do you think it was a misunderstanding? The younger members of the Mystic Covenant, like Ren's students, were less cautious than the higher-ups. They wanted to uproot all threats to the faction and remove them. I doubt it, but we don't need to rush to find out. The construction of the bridge is more important right now. Let's focus on making the project a success. In only a few days, news of the ancient cultivator's death spread across the realm. It was exciting news for everyone. The treasure hunter organization had settled down in Abyssum City, and the increase in cultivators benefited the city's ranking. The treasure hunters had searched the ancient cultivators' bodies before claiming the reward from the bounties. They hadn't found the formula for the strengthening liquid. We didn't find anything of value, Vince told Stephen when he asked him about it. How useful could it be anyway? You saw how easy it was to render their indestructible bodies useless. It's more valuable than you think. It's worth at least 100 billion, Stephen pointed out. Vince didn't believe him. What are you talking about? Even a medium-sized martial arts faction wouldn't have that much money to spend at a moment's notice. The 3 guild leaders of the Mercenary Guilds Alliance are desperate to get their hands on the formula. They wasted a lot of manpower and resources on it. It doesn't just make your body indestructible, it also extends your life. Vince was still skeptical. Do you really believe that? Stephen shrugged. Who knows? That's what they say in the rumors. With the death of the ancient cultivators, the whereabouts of the formula had become a mystery, and the astral thief became the only one with this knowledge. The ruins of the infinite prison had turned into a lively construction site. The bridge would start from here and extend across the abyss to the other side. Even if the construction proceeded smoothly, it would take more than half a year to complete. The head of the construction team glanced at Stephen, who was lingering by the edge, peering into the depths. Are you here because you're concerned about the project? No, I'm just interested in the bottom of the abyss. You'll regret it if you accidentally fall in. No one has made it out alive. Stephen had no plans to jump down. He summoned the threadworms at the edge of the cliff. They created tiny clones of themselves and drifted to the bottom with the wind. The corrosive effect from the miasma didn't have an effect on them. Their defenses had increased significantly after consuming so many ores and crystals. Through the eyes of the clones, Stephen saw a river of spatial fragments glowing faintly with starlight. It's breathtaking up close. The threadworms nudged him further away from the cliff. Don't get carried away. Many of our clones were shredded from the spatial fragments. Is there a way to defend against them? The tear from a spatial fragment isn't the same as a cut from a sword. It's a result of natural laws. No matter how many clones were lost, the threadworms' energy reserves were barely affected. Some of their clones had even jumped inside the spatial fragments to explore. Stephen's connection with them was instantly severed. In the rumors, a weapon with the ability to tear space and time had created the abyss. Theoretically, the weapon should be somewhere in the depths, but if the threadworms couldn't find it, it had probably been turned into metal scraps. Nothing could resist the tear from spatial laws. The threadworms' clones explored the bottom of the abyss for 10 minutes before all of them were wiped out. The noticeable spatial fragments drifted along the river of stars, while the others were buried in the ground. This was what made the abyss so dangerous. One wrong step and it was over. Unlike the rumors, there was nothing of interest at the bottom of the abyss. Stephen decided to head back to Minori City. As he was passing the outskirts of the Haven domain, he stopped by Mariah's factory for a visit. He was surprised to see Mariah there. He rarely showed up after retiring. Long time no see, Stephen. Are you here for an inspection? I'm not experienced enough to conduct an inspection. I was actually planning on asking your students for advice, since we're both in the same business. Mariah was still a world-renowned blacksmith, even though he'd retired. He wasn't concerned about the factory. His students were doing well without him. Mariah and Stephen strolled around the factory as they discussed their businesses. In Mariah's case, every product was a work of art. The slightest flaw could have a significant effect in battle, and his students were careful to forge each product to perfection. As for Stephen, his business appealed to business owners who used his weapons and equipment as a template for their own products, or used them as they were. Both Mariah and Stephen's businesses were profitable and appealed to different customers. Streamlining production of specialized weapons that were typically handmade was complicated, but if Mariah was interested, Stephen believed he could make it happen with the human realm's technology. Mariah didn't think the factory was ready for that yet, but it would be a project in the works for a future collaboration. As Stephen was walking to the Mystic Covenant's headquarters, he ran into Vivian at the street corner. "City Lord Stephen Adams, where have you been? Haven't seen your face in Minori City at all. Are you slacking off?" "I've been busy with other things. Why are you in the Haven domain?" "I was here to drop off a document at the Mercenary Guilds Alliance headquarters. They've informed every mercenary guild in the realm to send out a few people to the Haven domain so they can form a security team to maintain public order." Stephen didn't know what the Mercenary Guilds Alliance was up to, but it couldn't be anything good. Maintaining public order isn't as easy as it sounds. The Mystic Covenant's the perfect example. They're struggling even though they're a prominent faction. Your family shouldn't get involved with the Alliance. "We don't have a choice. They came prepared. They're threatening to manipulate the prices of each commission for the mercenary guilds that don't comply with their demands. We're a small mercenary guild. We can't afford to lose money. I think they're making excuses to reorganize the industry by expanding their influence. The stronger a guild is, the more mercenaries they can afford to send out, and this supposed security team will be under the Alliance's control. Any ideas on how to stop this?" "It's hard to argue against something they claim is good for the public. Send a few of your family's mercenaries to the Alliance and ask them to gather more information. I'll handle the rest." When the mercenaries who'd gone to Abysm City for the exhibition returned to the Haven domain and reported to the guild leaders, they exaggerated the details of the ancient cultivation's annihilation. "Stephen has too many allies. They're hard to deal with. I don't know when he joined the Treasure Hunter organization, but he contributed to their new construction project." The three guild leaders didn't have a reaction. Everyone in the realm had heard about the ancient cultivator's demise. They'd lost a powerful ally and their only clue to the formula. They were in low spirits from the double blow. It was the Falcon Guild leader who broke the silence. "It was a mistake to accept commissions to protect Stephen. He's making too many new connections." "What were we supposed to do?" the Demon Hunter Guild leader retorted. "We didn't have a legitimate reason to turn down the clients. Refusing the request would have ruined our reputation." The Falcon Guild leader glared at him. "So how do you suggest we resolve this issue?" "Calm down," the Thousand Hands Guild leader interrupted. "When the mercenary guilds send us their security teams, we'll monopolize the entire industry. We'll be on the same level as the Mystic Covenant. Stephen won't be a threat to us when the time comes." A stack of documents was piled up on the desk. They were responses to the Mercenary Guilds Alliance's demands to form a security team from smaller mercenary guilds established by wealthy families. Their development was limited compared to the Alliance. There are 88 responses. 40 of them agree, 20 are considering, and 18 couldn't be contacted. Those that haven't agreed are clearly against our proposal. Should we give them a warning? The Demon Hunter Guild leader asked. "We have a large number of new members. We need to make a good impression. Let's try lowering the prices of the commissions first," the Falcon Guild leader suggested. It was a surprisingly peaceful method that contrasted her hot temper. The door opened, and another mercenary entered the room. "Someone from Amethyst Auction House is here to ask about our order for equipment. They recommended including the logo of our alliance on the uniforms." "There's going to be a lot of members in the security team. Why do they have so many sets of equipment in their storage?" the Demon Hunter Guild leader asked suspiciously. "The Ruiz family is working with Stephen," the mercenary replied. "Their businesses have formed a partnership, and Amethyst Auction House is selling his products." "If I remember correctly, Stephen eliminated Holden Ruiz from the City Lord Challenge," the Thousand Hands Guild leader said. "Isn't Holden ashamed of working with his rival?" The Falcon Guild leader cut in. "You two shouldn't be so narrow-minded. The Ruiz family sees the benefits of working with Stephen. They're both business owners, and holding grudges isn't good to help develop their businesses. Their decision is understandable, and the prices work in our favor." The three guild leaders signed the documents and placed a large order. They tactfully avoided questioning the representative from Amethyst Auction House about their large storage of equipment or mentioning Stephen's name. At the Mystic Covenant headquarters, Stephen greeted the elders politely. He was mainly here to ask them about the newly established security team. A brand new building had been renovated across the street from the faction's headquarters, and the glittering golden words on the signboard read, Security Patrol Guard Headquarters. A group of representatives stood at the entrance and greeted the visitors. They were unfamiliar faces who seemed to have no connection with the Mercenary Guilds Alliance. The 3 guild leaders weren't there either. "Elders, are you sure you have time to leisurely sit here and drink tea?" Stephen asked. "The Mercenary Guilds Alliance formed a security team in the name of justice, but it's obvious that they're trying to compete with the Mystic Covenant." Tyrek calmly set down his cup. "They're just small fries hired by the Alliance. What would they be capable of?" "But shouldn't you do something about it? They're clearly provoking the faction." "They haven't committed any crimes. There's no reason for us to start a conflict." The elders weren't as anxious as Stephen. They preferred a peaceful life and wouldn't be taking action until it was necessary. In the time it took to brew a pot of tea, the peaceful atmosphere was broken. The heir to the Lynn family, Grayson, and the heir to the Parsons family, Rodri, came to visit their elders. The top 4 wealthy families of the Haven domain had deep connections, and they were on good terms with the Mystic Covenant. Grayson and Rodri were surprised to see Stephen in the office. They greeted him with friendly smiles, as if they had been competitors in the City Lord Challenge not too long ago. Grayson and Rodri were here with bad news. An unidentified individual was attacking mines, plantations, and other key industries at the border between the Haven and Polar domains. The financial losses weren't a big deal to wealthy families, but several of their employees had been killed yesterday. They were at the gold rank, and not just anyone could have beaten them in a fight. "Do you have any leads?" Tracy asked. "We've been investigating, but we still don't know who the culprit is. We thought the cities would be peaceful after the ancient cultivators were dealt with, but the situation hasn't improved." Grayson and Rodri looked a little more haggard than Stephen remembered. They'd probably stayed up all night to investigate. Tracy volunteered to bring her students to the scene of the crime to investigate. The elders had their own private properties, and they had a close relationship with the wealthy families. If the Lynn and Parson families were in trouble, the elders had to assist, especially when the circulation of ores and crystals was vital to the economy. "What happened to the employees?" Stephen asked. "Either the culprit destroyed their bodies or took them," Rodri said. "We didn't see any weapons left behind, but there was broken equipment lying around. The culprit also took the resources from the fields they attacked." The equipment included leather armor, arm guards, and combat boots produced by Stephen's factory. He asked Grayson and Rodri if they would let him see the broken equipment. They agreed, and Stephen took the evidence back to the human realm to operate the AI chips embedded inside. He hadn't been back to the villa in Annapolis for a while, but the house was spotless. Kim's clone was living here. The cloning technique she'd mastered allowed her clone and her main body to live and cultivate separately. When they fused, her clone's experience and improvements in cultivation would be transferred back to her main body. Kim's main body was in Wren's courtyard, diligently cultivating. The damage to the equipment wasn't that severe. Most of the attacks had been focused on the chest area of the leather armor. Stephen turned on the watch that was connected to the AI chips and entered a password. According to the data recorded, in the span of 0.01 seconds, the number of hits on the armor had exceeded 3 digits, and the force from the attack was close to 5 tons. This confirmed that the culprit was a cultivator, and they had attacked with the intention to kill. But this information wasn't useful in figuring out the culprit's identity. "Maybe we'll find a lead if we investigate the scene," Kim suggested. If their goal was to steal resources, they must have left traces behind while they were escaping. The threadworms can track them down. "Good idea. Let's head back to the Elysian realm." The area that was attacked was large and sparsely populated. There wasn't much security. If the culprit was hiding nearby, they could be anywhere. As Stephen and Kim's clone peered over the ice dragon's back at the land below, they saw a deep crater in the grassy fields. There was no sign of a large-scale explosion, which proved that the culprit was skilled. The machinery had stopped operating, and a group of people who they guessed were Tracy and her students were searching for clues. After stealing those resources, the culprits will most likely target a factory next. They'll either take over secretly or attack the personnel, Stephen said. "Are you going to wait for the culprit to make their next move?" Kim asked. "I don't know for sure if that's their plan. If we don't find any clues and they don't attack again, then there's nothing we can do." When the ice dragon landed next to the mine, there was a faint smell of blood in the air. Stephen and Kim's fellow faction members hadn't found any leads. The culprit had stolen brilliant stones, glazed stones, and rainbow crystals. Stephen summoned the threadworms. They buried into the ground and began their search for the culprit. The culprits behind the recent attacks were 8 fugitives who'd escaped from the infinite prison. They were hiding in abandoned tunnels underground. The most dangerous place was the safest place to hide. Why are we hiding in a tunnel? It wasn't easy to leave the prison. The darkness reminds me of all the years I spent in that place. Stop grumbling. We need to keep a low profile if we don't want to get caught. One of the fugitives, Flavius, placed a hand on the hilt of his sheathed sword. What's there to be afraid of? If they come after us, we can just kill them. It's been too long since we were last in the fight. The people we killed yesterday were hardly enough. Didn't you hear about what happened to Nadorun's team? They were the ones who detonated the prison. Not just an ordinary cultivator could have accomplished that. They were strong, but the treasure hunters managed to kill them. We can't underestimate their organization. Then how long do we have to hide? We'll be found out if we enter the cities. There's nowhere to hide except the wilderness, and I'm fed up with this kind of life. Most of the fugitives agreed with Flavius. They were confident in their strength. Escaping from prison meant living a life of luxury, not surviving in the wild. The leader of the fugitives, Xander, was a master of disguises. Because of his unique skill, the other fugitives saw him as their leader. If you really want to go back to the continent, we can return to Abysm City. After the bridge is finished, we'll explore the Dark Continent. Why is Abysm City our only option? Flavius argued. We were locked up for years near that place. Our cultivations aren't what they used to be. We need to concentrate on cultivating, and a remote city is the best choice. This is no time to be lazy, but I won't force you to come with me. Those who object are free to leave on their own. Xander's tone left no room for argument. The fugitives looked at each other. With Xander around, they had access to an endless supply of disguises. Abysm City was also changing now that the treasure hunter organization had settled down there. Xander's disguises would throw their pursuers off their tail, and checking out the city didn't seem like a bad idea. As they were discussing, a cluster of tiny earthworms crawled through the cracks in the ground and spotted the fugitives. The threadworms didn't know who they were, but they seemed suspicious because they weren't dressed like miners, so they reported their findings to Stephen. The suspicious individuals were concealing their auras, but the threadworms could sense something dangerous about them. There's a suspicious group in the tunnels. Should we lure them out? Stephen asked. Tracy nodded. They could be the culprits we're looking for. There's a lot of us here. We can handle it. Stephen leaped into the air and slashed with his sword, releasing a blade of light at the area where the threadworms had pointed out. The tunnels collapsed, and the remaining ore and crystal inside exploded. The fugitives heard the muffled explosions as flame and smoke filled the tunnel. They wasted no time returning to the surface. As the fugitives broke through the ground, Stephen unleashed another blade of light. This time it was tainted black with negative energy. Flavius unsheathed a large sword strapped to his back and blocked the light. The 2 fugitives beside him rushed at Tracy's students with clenched fists. When Tracy's students slashed the fugitives' arms with their swords, they staggered, but they weren't harmed. The fugitives charged into the crowd and attacked indiscriminately with their bare fists. Tracy recognized the suspicious group and transmitted her voice to Stephen and her students. They're prisoners from the infinite prison. Don't let your guard down and keep your distance. Use long-range techniques. Stephen couldn't believe it. He'd asked several people about the abyss, and everyone had told him there was no way the prisoners could have survived. Tracy's students changed tactics according to their teacher's instructions. They summoned several large phantoms that threw out balls of energy at the fugitives. Blinding light filled the arena, and shock waves tore through the land. The fugitives had unique techniques. One of them held his sword like it was a brush and painted a landscape painting in front of him. The energy of varying shades of color gathered in the air. They're wearing uniforms from the Mystic Covenant, but they're not that strong. Xander glanced at Tracy. The younger members aren't worth mentioning. It's the elders we should be wary of. Fall back once they're distracted. The landscape painting shone brighter and turned into a three-dimensional mirage. When the balls of energy struck the mirage, they were absorbed into the painting, leaving only the blinding light behind. The mirage was an illusion-type array that neutralized energy. The fugitive who'd cast it had painted an image in an independent space to set it up. As the light began to dim, the fugitives were already far away. Tracy ordered her students to stay put. After she reported the incident to the Mystic Covenant, the Zenith Council would have to deal with the consequences of not realizing that a group of prisoners from the Infinite Prison was on the loose. Stephen didn't have time to go to them and continued on his journey to Minori City. A more detailed summary of the incident would be announced shortly, along with the official arrest warrant. When he arrived at the administration building, his secretary informed him that the wealthy families in the city had invited him to a banquet to promote their businesses to the new city lord. Minori City's operations have been smooth ever since Stephen implemented his new management model. Some of the departments were busy, while others, like the warden's department, barely had any work. Stephen decided to bring him to the banquet. The former warden of the Infinite Prison, Nolan, was in his office, studying the faces on the wanted list. "You recognize the fugitives?" Stephen asked as he entered the room. "All of them, actually. This is my chance to make up for my mistakes. The Zenith Council hadn't started construction of the new prison yet. If this goes well, they might change their minds, and I'll go back to my old job." The fugitives on the run were some of the most dangerous criminals detained at the Infinite Prison. "I heard you fought with them." "Yeah, I did. They were stronger than the Mystic Covenant members." "That's to be expected. They've gone through countless life and death situations, and they have a lot of combat experience. It won't be easy to capture them." The wealthy families had reserved a luxury hotel not too far away from the administration building. They'd decorated the lobby in only half a day to prepare for the banquet. Stephen's amiable demeanor sharply contrasted Noah's intimidating presence, making the heads of the wealthy families subconsciously keep some distance between them as they discussed the future of Minori City. "As the new city lord, I'd like to introduce competition into the city. Businesses are all about survival of the fittest. We have to adapt, develop, and grow, or we'll lose our footing. Friendly competition is necessary to develop our city as a whole. If we isolate ourselves, we'll drop in the rankings." Stephen went on to explain the details of his plan. The wealthy families in Minori City would not be allowed to monopolize any industry. He would be inviting wealthy families from other cities to do business here, and as an incentive, they would have 2 years of tax-free subsidy, discounts on commercial land leasing, and priority in purchases. If they didn't have sufficient finances, they could apply for low-interest loans. Businesses that developed well would be promoted and rewarded. The wealthy families were less than thrilled about Stephen's plan. How was this any different from helping outsiders? They'd brought gifts for Stephen, but now they doubted how useful they would be in getting him on their side. One of them mustered up the courage and said, "It sounds like you're favoring our competitors in other cities." "Your current businesses have a monopoly on various industries in the city," Stephen explained. "The more comfortable you are, the less you'll improve your services and products. Monopolies will do more harm than good in the long run. Competition is necessary to develop the city. If our competitors are interested in doing business in our city, our population and economy will grow, including your businesses." The wealthy families had established a monopoly for many years. If they lost their advantage because of outsiders, relocating to another city wouldn't be an option, because their hard work would go to waste. They might have to compromise or give up part of their business or lower their scale to adapt. In the end, it wouldn't change the fact that outsiders would eventually take root in the city. It was a hard pill to swallow, but they didn't know what to say to change Stephen's mind. "To make things fair, I won't get involved in the competition." Stephen patted Nolan's shoulder and introduced him to the wealthy families. Nolan didn't have much to do these days, and he'd be overseeing the businesses and making sure that no one was breaking the rules. The wealthy families glanced at Nolan, who was busy wolfing down the food on the table. He wasn't paying attention to the discussion, but no one needed an introduction. Everyone knew who the former warden of the Infinite Prison was. If one fell into his hands, even if they didn't die, they would at least lose a layer of skin. The banquet soon came to an end. The wealthy families said their goodbyes and watched Stephen and Nolan leave. When they were gone, their faces fell. "We're going to let that brat do whatever he wants. What else can we do? He's the city lord. If we go against him, he'll ruin our families to set an example. Why else do you think he brought Nolan to the banquet? Should we visit the Sullivan family and ask them for help? No. We should take the initiative and invite our business partners to settle down in Minori City. That's not against the city lord's rules. We'll have the more say in the distribution of the profits. The city lord wants competition to develop our city. If we do that, aren't we going against what he wants? There will be competition, but if new businesses are our partners, we'll have more control over the scale of the competition. The majority had the final say, and the minority could only follow. The wealthy families set their sights on Seaflower City. It was close to Minori City, and they had quite a few business partners there. The next day, Minori City released an official announcement that included an invitation to wealthy families and businesses from other cities and a list of incentives. The notice spread far and wide. To some, this was an opportunity too good to pass up. This was an innovative approach never seen before in the Elysian realm. Before Stephen came along, the cities typically came up with all kinds of ways to plunder the business family's wealth to ensure the smooth operation of the official departments. Catering to businesses had never happened before. Whether Minori's city's claims were true or false, powerful families across the realm had made preparations for a trip to the city to scout. After becoming a city lord, Stephen had purchased a mansion in the northwestern region of Minori City. Kim had taken charge of the renovations, and the construction team was already working on them. "We don't need that much space. It's just the two of us and the beasts," Stephen said. "Since the house is so big, why not invite the Sky Lion and the other beasts from the Asura realm?" Kim replied. "We can stay here together." "That's not a bad idea." There was a scenic mountain behind the mansion. The beasts could live in the house or the wilderness, depending on their preferences. Within 3 days, wealthy families from other cities arrived in Minori City for a visit. As the person in charge of administrative matters, Dante greeted them and explained the details of Stephen's plan. The number of newly registered companies increased by 2 digits every day, followed by a large amount of investment. When Minori City made an official announcement, Stephen had sent an invitation to Mariah's students, inviting them to open a branch in the city. They consulted Mariah, and he agreed. Having a factory in the city was more accessible than the outskirts. While the city was bustling with activity, Kim's clone came to find Stephen. Her main body was cultivating at Ren's courtyard, and she had access to news around the realm from listening to Ren's students gossip. "There's a lot of people who aren't happy with your decision to poach wealthy families from other cities. The Mercenary Guilds Alliance is twisting your intentions and fanning the flames. The Zenith Council's assessment's coming up. It's competitive everywhere in the realm. Some of the wealthy families in Minori City have gone to Seaflower City. I don't know why they're there, but you should be careful." Compared to Stephen, the new lord of Seaflower City, Lorelei, was much more low profile. There was nothing special about her management. It was standard, and it wasn't that different from the rest of the cities in the realm. Late in the evening, a group of unfamiliar faces appeared at Lorelei's mansion. They were representatives sent by Idyllic City, Orchard City, and Saint City. They were at the bottom of the ranking and had secretly joined forces to avoid elimination. They were here to get Lorelei on their side so they could deal with Stephen together. Cities that were ranked towards the bottom typically had issues with their development. The number of wealthy families and cultivators would gradually decline, leading to a vicious cycle. Stephen's biggest source of profit is his business. It occupies a large portion of the income in Minori City. If we stop the supply of ores and crystals, the city's economy will plummet. Lorelei had been concerned about Zenith Council's assessment, but she didn't rashly agree to cooperate. She wasn't familiar with the city lords the representatives worked for, and she didn't know how much she could trust them. "How are you planning to monopolize the supply?" "We are going to purchase the ores and crystals that Stephen's business frequently uses at a price that's 5% higher than the market price. We'll inform the suppliers near Minori City. He only has a factory and a mine. He can't control the industry." It wasn't a complicated plan, and it depended on the amount of funds on hand. When the authorities shifted, the former city lord usually did everything in their power to take away their wealth in the city, leaving behind a large fiscal gap. In Minori City, the Sullivan family hadn't done something this extreme because they were on good terms with Stephen. However, this was a problem that Lorelei was facing. Seaflower City had just been rebuilt, and the debts from the construction projects had reached 200 million purple gold coins. She had to quickly find a way to pay off the debts and fill the fiscal gap. "Every city has its difficulties, but I can't provide you the funds," Lorelei said. "We're not here to ask for money. We'd like you to gather the suppliers so we can contact them in one place. If we stop the supply of ores and crystals to Minori City, Stephen's business will be affected. Even if they didn't cause any substantial damage to Stephen, it would still leave a negative impression on the wealthy families who are in Minori City to inspect. The shortage of raw materials would limit their business's development, and they would reconsider investing. Hoarding a large amount of ores and crystals is dangerous. If you don't handle them properly, the warehouse might explode. How are you planning to use them up?" Lorelei asked. "Our 3 cities have worked together to obtain a special construction project. We're going to rebuild the Infinite Prison on the outskirts of the Haven Domain. This project will consume an astronomical amount of raw materials. We'll get back the funds we used to purchase the ores and crystals in no time." Lorelei finally understood why the representatives were so confident. When she agreed to cooperate, they left and went to make arrangements. Later in the week, many businesses in Minori City were affected by the change in the raw materials market. The suppliers who were on their way to the city had changed destinations, and their fixed transportation routes had been adjusted. The shortage of raw materials limited the production and processing of numerous products, leading to an increase in price. Dante's family business was also affected. After a brief investigation, he went to find Stephen to tell him about the recent shortage. The construction team at Stephen and Kim's mansion had stopped coming by recently because they didn't have enough materials to continue, so Stephen was somewhat aware of the issue. "Someone is manipulating the supply, and their target is Minori City. To prevent the wealthy families from other cities from changing their minds and leaving, I'll have to make up for the lack of materials with the resources we have in the city's warehouses. But it won't last forever. If the wealthy families end up leaving, everyone will have a negative impression of our city." "How long will our resources last?" Stephen asked. "No more than 10 days. "Have you contacted the suppliers?" "Yes, there are 3 cities that are purchasing raw materials at a high price: Idyllic City, Orchard City, and Saint City. They're deliberately targeting our city's suppliers." Because the Elysian realm was vast, transportation from one destination to another wasn't as convenient. If the 3 cities convinced the suppliers to stop selling in Minori City, there likely wouldn't be any suppliers who'd be willing to make the long journey. Stephen couldn't figure out why these 3 cities were targeting them. He couldn't recall any past grudges between them. "Find out where they're storing the ores and crystals they purchased. I'll fix the shortage." After Dante left, Stephen went to the city's warehouses for an inspection. Aside from raw materials, there were herbs, food, weapons, and equipment. Large trucks were coming and going, and a few warehouses had already been emptied. The staff handed a list to Stephen. With so many businesses in the city, the daily consumption was high. As Dante had estimated, the resources in the warehouse would only last up to 10 days. How did the merchants who came to collect supplies react? "They're worrying about how they'll maintain their businesses after our warehouses are cleaned out," the staff replied. "From now on, all the raw materials that are sold from our warehouses will only require promissory notes as a record of the transaction. The merchants won't need to pay us back right away. They can settle the bill after the finances are sufficient. Make an announcement that Minori City has enough resources in our warehouse to make up for the shortage." The staff was skeptical. They assumed that Stephen was just pretending to be rich. The warehouses were emptying fast, and they wouldn't last more than 10 days. If the wealthy families went bankrupt and left, the burden of the debt would fall on the city lord's shoulders. Where are we going to get the necessary resources? Stephen summoned the threadworms. They opened their mouths, and an astonishing amount of ores, crystals, and other supplies began filling up the empty warehouses and the space outside. The resources piled up like a mountain. The staff was dumbfounded by the spectacular scene. They'd heard about the beasts around Stephen, but they never thought they'd be this resourceful. The threadworms followed Stephen everywhere, and during his travels across the Elysian realm, they'd come across mines, mineral veins, and abandoned warehouses. They consumed the resources that would improve their cultivation and stored the rest for emergencies. Pay close attention to the merchants when they stop by. Stephen instructed the staff. "Don't let them smuggle our raw materials. Inform Nolan if you find anyone suspicious." "Yes, sir." The crisis was temporarily resolved. While Stephen was inspecting the warehouses, Dante worked quickly and had already found the final destination of the ores and crystals the three cities had purchased at a high price. The vehicle had taken a big detour before arriving at the outskirts of the Haven domain. The Zenith Council has decided on where to construct the new prison. It'll be built 250 miles in a forest north of the center of the Haven domain. There were plenty of mines in the area, but the three cities had chosen to steal Minori City's suppliers. They'd even taken a roundabout route to their destination, which increased the cost of transportation. Every party involved was losing profit. Idyllic City, Orchard City, and Saint City are at the bottom of the rankings, Dante continued. It hasn't been long since Minori City was rebuilt. We're still low on rankings, and they want to push us down to save themselves. "Is the Zenith Council keeping the new prison a secret?" Stephen asked. To increase efficiency, they told some of the larger construction companies and had them compete for the prices. Your business isn't involved in the industry, so you weren't informed. They should have already signed a contract. We can't interfere with their decision. Despite everything, the shortage in resources had become an opportunity for Minori City. When representatives of wealthy families from other cities found out that merchants were allowed to purchase resources from the authorities and could even get them on credit, they immediately decided to invest or open a branch company. The lords of Idyllic City, Orchard City, and Saint City were gathered at an unassuming tea house in the Haven domain, sulking about their plan's failure. "The Zenith Council wants us to get started on the prison's construction as soon as we can. We can't keep wasting our time. We need to choose the supplier nearby to purchase raw materials from." "What about Minori City?" "Just pretend we're not involved." The three of them had funded the costs of transporting resources from afar, and it wasn't a small sum. The commercial contract they'd signed with the Zenith Council didn't include too many details, but they would be paid as long as the prison was built according to the blueprint provided. Overspending before the construction wasn't a wise decision. The Lord of Saint City didn't want to give up so easily. "I've never heard of a beast that can replenish resources. I think Stephen is bluffing. We should press them a bit longer. If Minori City continues to develop, it'll be harder to suppress them later. The Zenith Council's offering a high price for the construction. The minor losses won't matter." To ensure the successful construction of the new prison, the three city lords stayed in the Haven domain to supervise. After spending so much time and effort on Minori City, they were expecting high returns, but they couldn't do it on their own. They made a trip to the Mercenary Guild Alliance's headquarters to ask for assistance. The three guild leaders had been busy recently developing the security team. They went to the training grounds outside the city and personally taught the members. When the city lords arrived, the guild leaders treated them like VIP guests. They each had their own ulterior motives. The security team had just been established, but they'd already run into an obstacle. Several city lords and wealthy families had banded together to request the security team to search for the fugitives on the loose. Their request was no different from searching for a needle in a haystack. The fugitives had been detained in the Infinite Prison for a long time, and they'd lost contact from the outside world. After they were caught, their family and friends ran away, taking their assets with them. There was nothing of their old life left behind. If the fugitives hadn't attacked the Lynn and Parson families' properties, no one would have known that they'd survived. But the guild leaders hadn't established a security team to uphold justice. Their only goal was to suppress their competitors in the same industry. Many of the smaller mercenary guilds were moving to Minori City. Stephen was backing the Bellantine family's mercenaries, and he was likely to help them out as well. As more cultivators settled down in Minori City, their rankings would improve at a rapid rate. The three city lords asked the guild leaders if they could stop the smaller mercenary guilds from going to Minori City. "If we could use force to resolve the issue, we wouldn't have to have gone through so much trouble to establish a security team and slowly take over the industry," the Demon Hunter Guild leader replied. The city lords began to worry. The Zenith Council evaluated every city on a yearly basis. It took time for the Mercenary Guild Alliance to take over the industry, and they wouldn't wait that long. "We've taken measures to suppress Minori City's economy," the Lord of Saint City explained. "All we need you to do is help us attack the transportation vehicles near the city." The city lords couldn't keep purchasing resources at a price 5% higher than the market price, but from their recent transactions, they discovered the suppliers' routes and identities. If the mercenaries attacked them on the road, it wouldn't matter if they decided to go back to doing business with Minori City or not. The guild leaders were also interested in suppressing Minori City. Attacking the suppliers wasn't a difficult request. Even if the city lords hadn't asked, they still would have come up with another way to deal with Stephen. He'd only recently become the city lord, and his influence was limited. If Minori City was ranked at the bottom during the next ranking, he'd have to take part in a city lord challenge just like his predecessor. Once he lost his position, killing him would only be a matter of time. When prominent individuals were involved, a verbal agreement was more effective than a business contract. The Falcon Guild leader agreed to the city lord's request. "I'll send a team to set up an ambush near Minori City. They'll attack the suppliers and guarantee they won't make it to the city. We don't know exactly what Stephen's beasts can do, but they don't have an unlimited supply of resources. They'll run out soon." The roads outside Minori City became unsafe for caravans that were transporting ores, crystals, and other resources. They were frequently attacked and stolen from, but no one was ever killed. The suppliers were from wealthy families, and the financial losses weren't that big of a deal. It wasn't serious enough to ask for help from the authorities. All they could do was increase the number of personnel. In the evening, there was another explosion. A heavy truck was blown up and fell into the ravine by the road. The goods were ruined. The team transporting the cargo was injured, but fortunately, their wounds weren't fatal. The assailants fled into the forest right after the attack, not giving the team any chance to figure out who they were. In a conflict between wealthy families, martial arts factions, and city lords, it was the workers caught in between that became the punching bags. The team had lost 18 million purple gold coins worth of resources, but they weren't the first to be attacked. Their superiors would be angry, but who could defend against a lightning-fast ambush? The team staggered to their feet, consumed a medicinal pill, and went back to report to their superiors. They'd been attacked, but the consequences would fall on their superiors' shoulders, not theirs. When their superiors, the head of the Dyer family and the head of the Shannon family, received the news, they dismissed the team from their office and tried to come up with a solution. "It's impossible to do business in Minori City. We've lost too many resources, and the penalties for breach of contract are accumulating. Isn't there some way to contact the assailants and bribe them? It'll be less costly." "They've never shown their faces. We don't know who's behind the attacks." No one knew who the assailants were, but they could guess. There were only two possibilities. The first possibility was that Stephen wasn't thrilled by the supplier's decision to work with Idyllic City, Orchard City, and Saint City instead of Minori City, so he'd hired someone to attack them. As for the second reason, perhaps the three city lords couldn't afford to purchase the supplies for such a high price anymore, and had arranged for someone to attack the caravans to prevent the resources from ever reaching Minori City. In the beginning, the heads of the Dyer and Shannon families were satisfied with the 5% increase in prices that the three city lords had offered, but it wasn't long-term business. Their real income came from the merchants in Minori City and its neighboring cities. "Let's go to Minori City and meet with the city lord. Do you really think Stephen can help with 2 traders? It's not that complicated. We're fellow business owners. He'll understand. Those 3 cities offered higher prices. How could we refuse?" Although this was the conclusion they came to, they were still nervous about meeting the Lord of Minori City. They prepared a generous bundle of gifts before heading to the city. Stephen wasn't in a good mood when they entered his office. But then again, who would be thrilled to see the people who'd tried to ruin the city's economy? Stephen gave the 2 of them cold looks as they sat across from each other on the couches. "Why are you here? Shouldn't you be busy earning money?" "We're very sorry for being short-sighted. Minori City is an indispensable business partner of ours. We didn't want to give up on it, but we were offered a generous price that we couldn't refuse." "If you want to come back, then come back," Stephen said. "You don't need to tell me." "Thank you for being lenient with us, but we're actually here because we've encountered a small problem." Their complaints weren't anything that Stephen didn't know already. He was aware of the attacks targeting caravans outside the city. He'd sent his subordinates to investigate Idyllic City, Orchard City, and Saint City, but neither the city guards nor the wealthy family's subordinates had been mobilized. This meant that the assailants were someone else. Stephen had many allies in the Haven domain, and he'd been told that the 3 city lords had visited the Mercenary Guilds Alliance's headquarters. Nothing good ever came from his enemies having a private meeting. If the culprits weren't affiliated with the city lords or the wealthy families, then that left only the mercenaries. But without concrete evidence, Stephen couldn't accuse them of anything. I'll send 2 of my beast companions to escort your caravans, but they might not be able to protect your resources. This is a temporary measure. You should find a long-term solution on your own. Thank you very much, Mr. Adams, the 2 family heads said in unison. For the time being, the crisis had been averted. After sending them off, Stephen called Nolan to his office. The heads of the Dyer and Shannon families weren't the only ones who were attacked, and he couldn't possibly assign every wealthy family an escort. To fully resolve the problem at hand, he'd need to stop the mercenaries. Nolan was in high spirits when he strode into the office. His face was glowing, and he looked 10 years younger. The fugitives were at large, and he'd instructed his subordinates to track them down. This was their chance to make up for their mistakes. I have information about a treasury that belongs to the Mercenary Guilds Alliance, Stephen said. They say it's hidden underground in an ancient city. Have you heard anything about this? I heard some prisoners talking about it back when I used to be the warden, but I'm not sure how credible their information is. In the glacial domain, there's a frozen circular region of land that appears at certain times of the year depending on the season. In the summer, it shrinks, and in the winter, it expands. It's like the rise and fall of tides. At the border between the frozen circular region and the rest of the land, there used to be cities that fell in ancient times. The treasury you're looking for could be there. Although the infinite prison was isolated from the outside world, the prisoners were sometimes a reliable source of information. Life in prison was dreary, and the prisoners were given benefits in exchange for information. After working as a warden for so many years, Nolan had come to know many secrets of the Elysian realm. The glacial domain's always been known for its cold climate. Why are there so many cities built there in ancient times? Stephen asked. It's like a sanctuary for those on the run. In ancient times, conflicts were much more common than now. When a city was attacked, its residents usually fled north to hide in the glacial domain. The temperatures are below freezing. The spiritual energy in the air is frozen into shards of ice that pile on the snow. It'll be difficult for even a cultivator at the diamond rank to survive for long periods of time. Nolan had never been there himself, but he could tell how dangerous it was because the prisoners had told him that being locked up in the prison was better than escaping to the glacial domain. Stephen was impressed with the mercenaries for hiding their treasure in a region that only appeared during specific seasons. It was a brilliant move. From the look on Stephen's face, Nolan knew that he was interested in the mercenaries' treasure. Just because it was difficult for regular cultivators to survive in the glacial domain didn't mean the situation was the same for beasts. Perhaps Stephen could accomplish the impossible. Spread rumors that the fugitives are heading north and that there's a high possibility that they're searching for the Alliance's treasury, Stephen said. Nolan was hesitant. Isn't that a bit rash? We haven't seen the fugitives since that day in the fields. All is fair in war. I'm sure we're not the only ones curious about the Alliance's mysterious treasury. Minori City's media department made arrangements for a press conference, and Nolan was the speaker. As the former warden of the Infinite Prison and the epitome of fairness and justice, the public trusted him. After the news was released, the Mercenary Guilds Alliance's wealth became a hot topic. Some people guessed that they had more than 1 trillion purple gold coins in their treasury, while others speculated that they stored priceless ancient weapons in a secret vault. There were also guesses that the Alliance had set up a teleportation array that let them travel to any of the 6 realms to plunder ores and crystals. As more rumors spread, the more ridiculous they became. Even if the fugitives' curiosity wasn't piqued, there were many others who were interested in searching for the treasury. The 3 guild leaders were fuming in their office after watching the broadcast. Minori City's media department held the press conference. Stephen obviously told them to. So what if he did? We don't have a legitimate reason to blame him. Didn't you hear what Nolan said? He was just reminding the public to be wary of the fugitives. The point is that the location of the treasury has been exposed. Those who want our wealth will be looking for it. We need to send more people to strengthen the security. The Demon Hunter and Thousand Hands guild leaders were anxious. They were afraid that their assets would be plundered, but the Falcon Guild leader had a feeling that Stephen and Nolan didn't have much information on their treasury. The press conference hadn't been detailed. If they panicked, they'd be exposing themselves. The guards were well hidden in the underground ancient city, but there was a hard layer of frozen earth above. The Falcon Guild leader doubted that anyone had found its true location. If you ask me, this is another one of Stephen's traps. He sent out his beasts to escort the caravans. It's not easy for cultivators to travel to the glacial domain, and if his beasts are occupied, who could he have sent to find our treasury? Instead of sending more people to guard the treasury, we should station them on the outskirts of the glacial domain to be on the lookout. If anything happens, we'll know immediately. It was better to be safe than sorry. The 3 guild leaders selected the most experienced and loyal members of their respective guilds and ordered them to head north. The entire realm had eyes on the Alliance, hoping to get some clues to the treasury. Even if the information wasn't important to them, they could always sell the intel. It didn't have to be accurate to make a fortune. There were no risks involved either. Meanwhile, Minori City's roads were still being attacked. Thunder rumbled in an overcast sky, a sign of an impending storm. The ice dragon transformed into a handsome young man dressed in white and landed on top of the caravan. He instructed the team in the vehicle to be on guard. There was a faint aura coming from the forest to the left. The team acknowledged his warning and picked up their weapons. After experiencing so many ambushes, they'd gotten used to them. This was the first time the ice dragon had joined them, so hopefully their caravan would make it into the city. A blue ray of light shot out from the dense vegetation, targeting the back of the caravan, where the goods were stored. The ice dragon waved his hand and condensed a barrier of ice. When the light struck the barrier, it shattered, and shards of ice rained from the sky. A group of men in masks leaped out of the forest, unleashing a tempest of energy that swept down the road. The team in the caravan countered with a whirlwind of golden energy. The collision triggered a storm that dispersed the clouds overhead. The masked men were only at the gold rank, and the ice dragon didn't see them as a threat. He dove into the eye of the storm and released his spiritual energy to control the violent winds. The storm changed direction and swept toward the masked men. As they scattered and prepared to launch another attack on the caravan, icicles shot through the air. They managed to avoid a hit to their vitals with their years of combat experience, but they weren't unscathed. When the icicles grazed their skin, the ice dragon's bone-chilling energy invaded their bodies and froze their blood. The men in masks lost control of their limbs and collapsed in a heap. The team in the caravan rushed over and bound their wrists and ankles before expressing their sincerest gratitude to the ice dragon. Stephen had a telepathic connection with the beasts, and he'd seen the battle through the ice dragon's eyes. He left the city to interrogate the assailants. A crowd of people from Minori City heard the commotion and filed past the gate to watch. "I've frozen their limbs and meridians. They won't be able to run," the ice dragon said. "Good work. Did any of them get away?" "No, they're all here." Stephen nodded and began the interrogation. The mercenaries had joined the Alliance for money. They had no loyalty to speak of. When they saw Stephen, they pleaded for mercy and told him everything they knew. They didn't know if the 3 city lords were involved, but they revealed that the guild leaders had ordered them to ambush the caravans. The crowd was even angrier than Stephen. Their business had been greatly affected. He calmed them down by handing the assailants over to the authorities to investigate their claims. After that, they would discuss compensation for the losses. The incident spread to the guild leaders not long after. They were painted in a bad light, but aside from complaining, there was nothing they could do about it. Peace returned to the main roads leading to Minori City, and the prices for raw materials returned to normal. However, chaos had ensued in the glacial domain. "My team is heading north, but there are thousands of cultivators on their way to the glacial domain," Nolan said. "It's hard to identify who the Alliance sent to the north when there's so many people. If the fugitives are among the crowd, it'll be hard to spot them. There was no such thing as good or bad in the face of profits. Some of the righteous martial artist factions had sent their own teams to the north with the excuse of upholding justice and eradicating evil. They were further encouraged after the assailants, whom Stephen had interrogated, revealed that it was the Alliance who'd sent them to ambush the caravans. The public was eager to investigate anything related to the mercenaries, and many of them were heading north with the excuse of clearing up the truth or fighting against evil. "When there's a crowd, it's hard to make a move," Stephen said. Let's hope the cold does the job for us." While they were discussing, two figures flew through the window as quick as lightning. It was the Sky Lion and a young woman Stephen had met near the abyss. Her name was Julaine, and her true form was a spider-like beast with tentacles. Last he'd heard, she'd safely brought all of her companions to the Asura realm. "Why the sudden visit?" Stephen asked. "Did you get bored of the Asura realm already?" Julaine's eyes flashed with desire. "I'm obviously here because I heard about the mercenaries' treasury." Stephen glanced at the Sky Lion and knew he was here for the same reason from the expectant look on his face. "Sorry to break it to you two, but our press conference was fabricated. We spread rumors to get back at the mercenaries." "The guild leaders were worried and sent a team to the north," the Sky Lion pointed out. "That means there's some truth to your rumors." The spiders from the Beastia realm needed money, and Killian also needed money. Neither Julaine nor the Sky Lion were keen on following the rules of the Elysian realm. If Stephen left them to their own devices, who knew what kind of trouble they'd get themselves into? Left with no other choice, they set off for the north together. Based on the map of the Elysian realm, there were 4 cities in the glacial domain that underwent changes to their frozen lands depending on the season. As the ice dragon flew towards the glacial domain, Stephen looked down and saw that the once desolate road was packed with a continuous stream of traffic. Like Nolan had said, with this many cultivators, it was hard to identify specific individuals because their auras were mixed together. If a fight broke out, the destruction of the cities would be devastating. It wouldn't be surprising if the damages caused several cities to drop to the bottom of the rankings and force the city lords to participate in a challenge. The Nori City and Seaflower City were prime examples. The former city lords had rebuilt their cities, but they couldn't stop the economy from declining and cultivators from leaving. They could only watch as the power in their hands was taken away. Stephen's watch vibrated and pulled him from his thoughts. It activated whenever he was within a certain range of an AI chip embedded in armor produced by the factory. It seemed like the guild leaders had ordered a set of equipment for the mercenaries they sent to the north. The dots on the watch's display indicated the mercenaries' location and included data on their cultivations. "I found them," Stephen said to the ice dragon. "Follow the silver cars below." Julaine peered curiously at his watch. "What is this bracelet? It's glowing, but it's not made of energy crystals." "It's a watch. I'll bring it to the human realm and show you what it can do when we have a chance." The convoy from the Mercenary Guilds Alliance was low-key. They blended in with the crowd of cars and drove at a moderate pace. The guild leaders had sent their students to the north along with a team of mercenaries to assist them. Their students' cultivations had reached the diamond rank, while the other mercenaries were at the gold rank. "There's so many people trying to track us down. We can't go anywhere without someone following us. We're the guild leader's students, but they didn't even tell us where the treasury is. Our job is to make it to the north, ignore them, and let them waste their time trying to find it. Instead of doing nothing, we can start a conflict and drain their energy. Every cultivator has a grudge. All we need is a fuse." The further north they went, the colder the climate became. The cost of living in the cities was considerably high, and there weren't that many who could afford it. Those whose cultivations or finances were lacking stayed in the smaller villages scattered throughout the domain. The Falcon Guild leader's student, Jax, had told the mercenaries to stop in front of the small village and insisted on spending a night here. "We're in the middle of nowhere and we're not familiar with the village. What if someone sneaks up on us?" "Even better, it'll make the night go by faster." Ever since the Falcon Guild leader's favorite student, Monica, was killed during the City Lord Challenge, Jax had wanted to climb the rankings in the guild and take Monica's place. He had blind confidence in his skills. The ice dragon landed on a mountain in the distance, watching the mercenaries enter the village. "Should we capture them and get them to tell us where the treasury is?" "The guild leaders are cunning," Stephen said. "They wouldn't share that information with just anyone. I wouldn't be surprised if they kept it a secret from their students." "Why did they send the mercenaries here then?" "Probably to mislead everyone else." There were vehicles driving through the snow, searching for a suitable place to spend the night. The cities in the glacial domain had issued a warning. Visitors were not allowed in the cities at this time. If they sneaked in, they'd be treated as dangerous individuals. Residents of the cities were required to show proof of their identities before entering. "There are so many bonfires," the Sky Lion observed. "Aren't they worried about being ambushed in the dark?" A meaningless fight doesn't help anyone, but you never know what might happen. Let's find a cave to spend the night. The beasts were experts at surviving in the wild. The temperatures dropped to dangerous lows at night in the glacial domain, but with the beasts around, Stephen was certain that at the very least, he wouldn't freeze to death. As for the other cultivators, there was no telling what would happen later in the night with so many of them gathered together. He had a feeling that it would be a sleepless night for several of them. When the moon was high in the sky, Jax and 2 other mercenaries sneaked out of the village. To create conflict among the cultivators searching for the treasury, they would need a fuse like strange and unexpected deaths. If the culprit wasn't found, they'd begin to suspect each other. Across the snowy lands, burning bonfires dispersed the chilly winds of the night. Barbecued meat gave off a delicious aroma, and a relaxing atmosphere settled over the area like it was a campsite and not the middle of nowhere. At the bonfire, a group of cultivators took out flasks of wine and chatted in low voices. There's around 3 more days until we reach the frozen lands. It's going to be a long and boring journey. You're missing the point. The north is covered in snow and ice. There won't be a road for us to drive on. We'll have to get there on foot. There aren't that many cultivators who can survive for long in the glacial domain without proper shelter. We need to find a city. They're not accepting visitors right now. How are you planning to get in? We can try our luck, but if we really can't convince the guards to let us in, then we'll purchase supplies from the residents at a high price instead. They were aware of their own limitations. Provoking the authorities in the cities was a bad idea. According to Minori's city's press conference, the fugitives from the Infinite Prison were also looking for the treasury. If they weren't careful, they'd be treated as the fugitives' accomplices. While they were drinking and engrossed in idle chatter, Jax had sneaked up behind them and hid in the sparse vegetation, using the darkness of the night to cover his tracks. He took out a vial of powdered poison. Sensing that the wind was blowing in the right direction, Jax spilled the contents into the air. It was colorless and odorless. When the powder drifted near the bonfire in the breeze, it sprinkled on the meat. It wasn't a lethal poison, but it made the cultivators drowsy. I'm tired. I'm not in my prime anymore. My old bones can't handle long journeys anymore. I'm going to bed. Maybe we drank too much wine. I'm feeling a little tired myself. Let's rest up early. We have a long road ahead of us tomorrow. The cultivators shuffled to a tree stump or a boulder and fell into a deep sleep. Jax crossed the clearing with light steps. When he plunged his sword into their chests, their internal organs burst from his invading energy. Even the gods couldn't save them now. Jax regrouped with the other 2 mercenaries and went to look for other bonfires. The threadworms tailed them from behind, watching as they swiftly slaughtered several more groups of unsuspecting cultivators before returning to the village. To the mercenaries, human lives were as insignificant as weeds. When the sun rose, no one paid attention to the dead. Each bonfire marked a team's territory, and they never ventured too far into another's. Traveling in broad daylight wasn't a peaceful journey. The teams gradually recognized familiar faces in the crowd whom they'd held grudges against. They couldn't start fights in the city, but here there were no rules. Reaching the frozen lands wasn't a race. They could always set some time aside to fight and heal before continuing. The mercenaries are on a killing spree. Should we join them? The ice dragon asked, feeling bored as it watched explosions of energy set off one after another in the snow below. Stephen observed the red dots moving quickly on his watch. Let them fight it out. We have other places to be. Nolan sent a team to the frozen lands to check out the area. They're waiting for us. The glacial domain aligned with the ice dragon's element, making it much stronger than the other beasts. The ice dragon was disappointed that they didn't have time to join the fray, but it kept going as instructed. It turned into a dazzling white light, flew into the clouds, and headed north. The 4 cities with alternating frozen lands were situated in a straight line. They weren't that far from each other. They were only 200 miles apart. This year, the land had remained frozen for over 10 months. The lords of the 4 cities were currently discussing important matters in a garden of ice and snow. Few plants could survive in such extreme climates, so the residents of the glacial domain had mastered the art of crafting decorative plants using ice. The peaceful days are coming to an end. A single rumor motivated thousands of cultivators to travel to the glacial domain. Who cares about the outsiders? Shouldn't we look for the treasury too? The 4 city lords were tempted by the enormous wealth. They'd noticed mercenaries visiting the glacial domain every few years, but they hadn't known what the reason was until now. The Mercenary Guilds Alliance sure knows how to keep a secret. They built a secret vault right under our noses. It's not too late for us to find out now. If we questioned them earlier, they might have moved their treasury elsewhere. There are rumors that it's in an underground ancient city, but the layer of frozen earth is so thick that it's impossible to dig through. There has to be a secret entrance. It's not that hard to figure out. We'll allow visitors into the cities and register their identities to differentiate the mercenaries from the others. Then we'll follow them, and they'll lead us straight to the entrance. Their plan was a bit unreliable, but it was the safest. To reduce the number of competitors, they planned to restrict the visitors' purchases and limit how far they could travel. If necessary, they could also spread false rumors that the authorities had found clues to the treasury and lure visitors into dangerous areas. As city lords of an extreme environment, there were an endless number of methods to control the situation. Looking at the trends, the climate and land has changed since ancient times. The frozen layer of earth has been slowly shifting to the south. If we find the treasury, it won't just be the mercenaries' wealth. There could be something else in the ancient underground city. The wealthy families and martial arts factions sent so many teams to the glacial domain, but they'll end up with nothing if we get to the treasury first. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. They outnumber us. We don't need everything. We just need enough to make our efforts worthwhile. While the city lords toasted to a prosperous future, the ice dragon landed on the snow outside the city gates. There was a dense crowd of guards and a long line of visitors waiting to register their identities. The thought of waiting an entire day just to gain access gave Stephen a headache. The process to enter the cities is too complicated. How long do we have to stand out here? Just reveal your identity, the ice dragon said, shifting into his human form. Tell them we're here to catch the fugitives who escaped. If the guards try to stop us, they'll be obstructing official orders and risk being treated as accomplices trying to hide the fugitives. You are so clever, Stephen said, ruffling the ice dragon's hair. He confidently strode up to the guards in front of the illusionist city with the beast behind him. Before the guard could get angry, he flashed his token that identified him as the Lord of Minori City. We have important clues about the fugitives who escaped from the Infinite Prison. We're under orders from the Zenith Council to investigate the cities. The guard's expression turned friendly as they carefully inspected Stephen's token. The city lords were on equal footing with one another, and they were all managed by the Zenith Council. Things would get troublesome if they interfered with official orders. Welcome to the city, Mr. Adams. If you need any help, please let us know. It is our duty to maintain the peace of the realm. Stephen pocketed his token. Thank you for your assistance. The second he stepped foot in the city, his arrival was reported to the Lord of Illusionist City. The city lord was a visually impaired elderly man. When he first took over the position, an assassination attempt left both his eyes injured, but he was just as strong with or without his sight. The city lord quickly excused himself from his meeting with the others and returned to his mansion to meet Stephen. The Infinite Prison's detonation was a serious incident to the Zenith Council. The city lord didn't have any leads about the fugitives' whereabouts, but he still had to make an appearance when someone whom the Zenith Council had sent to investigate was here. As Stephen walked into the guest hall with the ice dragon, Skylion, and Julaine in human forms, an elderly man with long white hair and a sage-like demeanor came forward to greet him. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Adams. You've accomplished far more than your peers despite your young age. You're too kind. I wouldn't have made it this far without my companions, Stephen replied humbly. The city lord's eye sockets were empty, but Stephen could feel his sharp gaze had already scanned him multiple times. Both of them spoke respectfully and righteously. The city lord expressed his full support for Stephen's mission by immediately issuing a wanted notice and mobilizing a team to search for the fugitives. He also provided him and his companions with accommodations for free. On our way here, we saw a long line of visitors waiting to enter the city, Stephen said. They're probably here for the mercenaries' treasury. Have you implemented any regulations to maintain order? We're making it a requirement for visitors to register their identities at the gates, the city lord replied. Their identities will be verified. Dangerous weapons and hazardous miscellaneous items will be prohibited. We can provide you with a list of names of recent visitors in case the fugitives have sneaked into the city. A scrumptious meal had been prepared for Stephen's arrival. The beasts had astounding appetites, and they kept the staff in the kitchen busy for several hours without stopping. The city lord personally made arrangements for accommodations in a luxury hotel close to his mansion. Just as Stephen stepped into his hotel room, there was a knock at the door. It was Nolan's subordinates. They were dressed like the residents of the glacial domain to make it easier to blend into the crowd and gather intelligence. Each of the 4 cities sent out their own team to search for the treasury. We've been looking for it for the past few days, but we haven't found any leads. Stephen had seen it coming. The mercenaries' wealth was tempting to everyone, including the city lords. It's fine. If it were that easy to find it, I'd question how reliable the information was. Wait for the teams from the wealthy families to enter the city and follow them. Individual visitors to the glacial domain ran around with no direction. They didn't have the necessary resources or intel to find the treasury. The only ones who stood a chance were the wealthy families. As the days passed, the queue outside the city gates became longer and longer. After a tiring journey and continuous conflicts, the cultivators needed a place to recover and replenish their supplies. A list of registered visitors was delivered to Stephen's hotel at the same time every day. With confirmation from the red dots on his watch, he'd more or less confirmed the mercenaries' locations. The best strategy was to stay put and wait for something to happen. While all kinds of rumors were spreading, 3 fugitives, Flavius, Dallas, and Sven, arrived in the glacial domain. The other fugitives were hiding in Abysm City. They were familiar with the terrain, and the dense miasma provided a convenient cover. The 3 fugitives weren't in a rush to enter the 4 cities with alternating frozen lands. They stopped in a forest on the outskirts of the cities, examining the bodies strewn over the snow. "No one knows where we are," Flavius said. "Minori City used us as bait when they held the press conference." "It doesn't matter," Dallas replied. "This is a good opportunity for us. We need money to get by." "How are we going to get rich if we don't know where the treasury is?" "The visitors to the domain are useless," Sven said. "They don't know anything. We need to set our sights further. For example, the lords of the 4 cities. If we're caught, the 3 of us can fend them off. I once slaughtered an entire city on my own. It's doable." Flavius was dubious. "That's easier said than done. How are we supposed to sneak in? Leap over the walls?" Dallas smiled cryptically. "I have a way to get us inside after dark." When night fell, the fugitives leaped into the sky thousands of feet above the ground. The chilly winds were like knives grazing on their skin. Dallas pointed at the long line of visitors waiting outside the gates. "If we kill some of them, the guards will be too distracted to pay attention to us." He gathered the icy spiritual energy in the air into snowballs and bombarded the visitors. Instead of exploding upon impact, they froze everything nearby. A layer of ice formed on the visitors' bodies. The stronger ones were able to shatter the ice quickly and prevent the energy from damaging their organs. The weaker ones were turned into ice sculptures in the span of a few minutes. They collapsed and shattered into fragments of ice. Chaos ensued as the crowd surged towards the city gates. The guards split up to help the wounded and search for the culprit. As more snowballs gathered in the air, the range of impact grew wider, triggering the city's defensive arrays. The visitors took advantage of the commotion to sneak past the gates. Among them were Flavius, Dallas, and Sven. When the first wave of attacks began, they'd already blended into the crowd. The guards were under a lot of pressure. They had to maintain the city's reputations, treat the wounded, and search for the culprit at the same time. If they couldn't find the person behind the attacks, all responsibility would fall on them. Stephen stood by the window in his hotel room and gazed into the distance. "What's the matter?" the ice dragon asked, coming over. "You look worried." "The visitors didn't instigate the attacks. It was the fugitives." After comprehending the Book of Destiny and learning from the Dragon Clan's prophet, Stephen's perception of danger was higher than most cultivators. "Isn't that the authorities' problem? The fugitives are here for the treasury, not you." While that was true, Stephen couldn't relax. Cultivators with no moral boundaries were like a ticking time bomb. A knock sounded at the door. It was one of the hotel's staff. She informed Stephen that the city lord had restricted access past the gate. No one was allowed to leave the city until further notice. It was the same as putting everyone in the city under house arrest to make them easier to manage. Stephen gestured to the remaining visitors at the gate. What about them? Are you just going to leave them out in the cold? The hotel staff had been residents of the glacial domain for decades, and they were familiar with all kinds of protocols. The authorities will prepare tents, fresh water, and food in an empty space by the gate. If they choose not to stay in the tents, then they can continue to wander outside the city without access to supplies. I don't believe they're daring enough to survive the glacial domain without shelter. Sooner or later, they'll be frozen in the wilderness. The glacial domain's residents knew why there was a sudden influx of visitors. They'd been living here all their lives, but they'd never heard of an underground treasury. They were doubtful that these visitors could find it. Stephen nodded at the staff, indicating that he would abide by the city's rules. Through the window, he could see the guards in uniform leading a crowd to the northwestern region of the city 5 miles away from the gate. It used to be a botanical garden, but the authorities had decided to set up tents here for the visitors' temporary stay. The temperamental visitors who refused to follow the rules were dragged out of the city and thrown out. The leader of the guards gave the rest of the visitors a stern warning. Those who aren't satisfied with our rules are free to leave. If you disturb the peace again, you'll be treated as accomplices of the fugitives. His eyes swept over the visitors, like a sharp knife pressed against their necks. The guards were formidable, and their influence and intimidation quieted the crowd in an instant. Their freedom wasn't restricted, but the food options were limited. They felt insulted by the lackluster treatment. Even if the city didn't provide tents, food, or water, they would have been able to survive on their own by relying on their high cultivation, medicinal pills, and other supplies that they'd prepared for the journey. The city lords had intentionally kept these visitors in tents to control the competition. When everyone was gathered close to each other, there'd always be a visitor or two who couldn't hold back from settling their grudges. Flavius, Dallas, and Sven were staying in a different tent in Illusionist City. They transmitted their voices to each other to plan their next move. The tents are surrounded by guards, Sven said. It won't be easy to slip past them and kidnap the city lord. I sense a defensive array below us, Dallas added. It's wide enough to cover the entire area. We'll trigger it if we're not careful. Flavius didn't think the array was much of a problem. If a fight breaks out, the guards wouldn't activate the array and risk killing everyone. Many of the visitors have deep backgrounds. If they died in another domain, it wouldn't be a good look for the city. The problem is, how are we going to leave the tents without being spotted? Sven asked. We don't need to target the city lord right away. We'll find some suitable targets, kill them, and make the authorities uneasy. Like the mercenaries, Flavius regarded human lives as worthless. Killing meant nothing to him. It was merely a pastime. Some of the visitors fell asleep once they settled in the tents. They believed that there was nowhere safer in the cities and let down their guard. Unfortunately, the fugitives were on the loose, and the rules were at most a piece of scrap paper. Flavius and Sven left their respective tents and pretended to stretch as they attached their energy to the vegetation covered in frost. The flowers, plants, and trees were frozen from the cold, and their petals and leaves turned into sharp projectiles from their energy. There was a quiet snap as the petals and leaves detached from the stems and hovered over the tents. When cultivators fought, they aimed to end the battle in as few moves as possible. The petals and leaves slipped through the gap in the tents and drifted over the sleeping visitors' chests. Flavius and Sven's energies gently penetrated their skin like a mosquito bite, leaving no evidence behind. They're full of openings, Flavius grumbled, transmitting his voice to Sven. If they happened to stumble upon the treasury, they would have been too weak to steal the treasure inside. The operation was so smooth that Flavius felt like there was no challenge. More than 20 visitors were killed quietly by the petals and leaves. The Falcon Guild leader student, Jax, couldn't hold it in either and went on another killing spree using the same trick of mixing poison into the wind. It was colorless and odorless, making it undetectable. When the cultivators fell into a deep sleep, he attached his energy to the leaves nearby and covered the visitors' mouths and noses to suffocate them. The night appeared to be quiet and peaceful, but dozens of bodies were discovered the next morning when the guards stopped by the tents to deliver food and fresh water. There were no clues as to who the culprit could be. Now it was the Lord of Illusionist City's turn to be troubled. He went to find Stephen. So many people have died after one night in our city. If this gets out, our reputation will be ruined. Letting the visitors stay in the city is too problematic. I suspect the fugitives are hiding among them. I need to get them out of here. How are you going to do that? Stephen asked. They won't leave unless they have a reliable lead. I'm planning on spreading 2 rumors about the treasury's location. There's a stream 400 miles to the east and a pond 300 miles to the west. If the fugitives did infiltrate the city, they'll have to check it out with the other visitors. The Eagle's Gully was a mountain stream thousands of feet above sea level. There was a unique gravitational force on the mountain that crushed trespassers when they got too close. The Bitter Pond was a small lake filled with poison. A rare plant that thrived in cold environments grew on the shore, and its roots released poison that polluted the water in the pond. The 4 cities issued a warning at the same time. They announced that the fugitives had gone to Eagle's Gully and to Bitter Pond and warned outsiders to stay away. This was the lead that every visitor to the glacial domain had been waiting for. They slowly left the cities one by one to search for the treasury despite their lack of resources. The cities prohibited trading, and the visitors had no choice but to purchase supplies from the residents at high prices. As a city lord who had supposedly given orders by the Zenith Council to search for fugitives in the glacial domain, Stephen had to investigate both areas. He and the guards followed the visitors from a distance on sleighs. Most of them were heading to the Bitter Pond first. Hounds pulled the sleighs, moving quickly across the slippery ice. This was the most convenient mode of transportation in the glacial domain. The ice dragon reduced its size to that of a dove and landed on top of a tent in Illusionist City. The mercenaries are lounging in their tents. That's not surprising, Stephen said. They know the city lords don't have information about the treasury. They must be waiting for orders from headquarters before heading out. Is there anyone else in the tents? The elderly and the cultivators who were injured on their way here. They'll be leaving the glacial domain soon. Keep an eye on the mercenaries. The auras of the guards in the same sleigh as Stephen were deep and profound. All of them were stronger than him, but he was the city lord, so they treated him with respect. When they reached the shore of the Bitter Pond, Stephen coughed from the pungent smell in the air. Is that the smell of poison? I thought it was just in the water. A small concentration is in the air, but with your cultivation, you won't be affected aside from the smell. Stephen examined the pond from afar as the guards explained what lay beyond the murky waters. The pond was divided into a section of shallow water around the perimeter and a section of deep water at the center. The water in the deeper section was much darker than the rim. It looked like a bottomless pit. There was a spiral staircase beneath the surface of the pond that led to an underwater creature's lair. It started from the shallow edges and descended into the depths at the center. There were patches of poisonous plants growing by the shore. When the unlucky cultivators were passing by the plants, the wind swept past and pollen landed on their skin. Their bodies itched as their skin cracked and pus flowed out. Their corroded muscles began to decompose. In the blink of an eye, all of them turned into a pile of bones. But seeing their gruesome deaths didn't deter the other cultivators. They were determined to explore the pond. The wind had died down, and the pollen had mixed with the soil on the shore. As they approached the pond, an explosion erupted in a pillar of water. The shockwave crushed the plants by the shore, spreading poison in every direction. Before the dust settled, the temperature dropped rapidly, and a thick layer of ice spread over the pond. A few hot-tempered cultivators jumped onto the ice and swung their axes. They used their full strength, but they didn't leave a single crack. The cultivators tried fire, lightning, and acid, but nothing worked. The amount of damage was minimal. All their attacks did was create a mist over the pond. As they were lamenting how long it would take to break the ice, they didn't notice a black shadow in the water. Huge claws raked at a layer of ice from below, and it shattered into pieces. A 10-foot-tall creature with brown fur and sharp claws emerged from the water. It looked like a monkey, except its tail was like a fin, suitable for swimming in the water. The cultivators exchanged confused glances. What is that? A beast? Do you think the fugitives summoned it to guard the treasury? It hasn't been that long since they escaped from prison. When would they have had the time to tame a beast? It's more likely that it's the guardian of the treasury. That means we're in the right place. Let's kill it and get what we came for. While they were discussing, the water monkey rushed into the crowd and swiped its claws. They were as sharp as swords. A few cultivators were shredded instantly. Blood stained the ground, and everyone assumed defensive stances. The most primitive way of killing was close combat, which the water monkey excelled at. Aside from its claws, its tail packed a surprising amount of force when it slammed into the cultivators. An audible crack rang out. The monkey's fur could harden and detach, turning into needles. When they struck the cultivators, poison spread throughout their bodies. It was more deadly than the poisonous plants growing on the shore. The monkey lived in the poisonous bitter pond all year round, and the poison it had accumulated inside its body had reached an unfathomable amount. The close-range massacre resulted in hundreds of bodies lying on the shore. The cultivators turned around and ran. The water monkey was strong, but it didn't seem to know how to use its spiritual energy. It was only relying on its instincts to kill. As the cultivators ran, they set up an array that bombarded the pond with balls of energy. The water monkey threw the cultivators a look of disdain before jumping back into the pond and resealing the surface. The cultivators hadn't gained anything from the battle except the spiral staircase leading to the bottom of the pond. They were even more convinced that the treasury was here and that the beast was the guardian. The greater the risk, the greater the gains. No one wanted to give up at this critical moment. Stephen and the guards had been waiting an entire day for the fugitives, but they hadn't shown up. They could waste all their time here, so they headed back to the city. Some of the cultivators had given up and left, while others had set up camp in the area, preparing to launch another attack. The guards shook their heads. They're greedy and have blind confidence in their skills. They've lost sight of reality. As they spoke, they subtly observed Stephen's expression. The Lord of Illusionist City couldn't see, but everyone who stood before him had their hearts reflected like a mirror. He was suspicious about Stephen's motive for coming to the glacial domain. Perhaps he was here for the treasury like the rest of the visitors. After all, the enmity between Stephen and the Mercenary Guild's alliance was well known. Stephen's expression remained impassive. He hadn't been completely honest with the city lord, but it was true that he didn't need the wealth inside the treasury. He was mainly here to accompany the beasts and make sure they stayed out of trouble. In the evening, the cultivators who stayed behind sat around their bonfires and analyzed the strength and weaknesses of the beasts. They planned to attack again tomorrow morning. After they killed it, they could descend the spiral staircase. The three fugitives were wandering the area, eavesdropping on their conversation and snickering. There are very few mercenaries with tamed beasts. Why would the Alliance leave a guardian beast to guard the treasury? The water monkey is primitive and brutal. Its intelligence hasn't completely awakened. It wouldn't listen to a bunch of humans. From the battle with the beast in the pond, the fugitives had a rough grasp on the cultivator's skills and experience, and they weren't worth mentioning. The minutes ticked by, and the cultivators gradually entered a meditative state to replenish the energy they spent in battle. The fugitives each took out a prop and stepped into it. Their hair, bodies, and aura turned into a miniature version of the water monkey. The leader of the fugitives, Xander, was a master of disguises. He could steal the sky and turn it into the sun. His props could change a cultivator's body and merge their weapons with their skin in any shape they chose. The fugitives had claws like the beasts in the pond. They darted towards the cultivators gathered around the bonfire and struck them in the head or the heart. The smell of blood woke the other cultivators from their meditative states. They jumped to their feet and lit up the night sky with flames. They sucked in a breath as the fire shed light on the shore. The water monkey's appearance was still fresh in their minds. One was hard enough to deal with, but now there were three. The fugitives didn't give them time to process. They rushed at them and slashed with their claws. Blood sprayed, and limbs scattered over the snow. They were attacking primitively to mimic the water monkey, but their speed was much faster. Let's get out of here. Who knows how many of them there are? We can't beat them. Where there is life, there is hope. The pond isn't going anywhere. Let's come back after we prepare. The cultivators' confidence had vanished, and they fled at high speed. The fugitives removed their disguises, returning to their original appearances. Flavius grinned as he looked at the bloody bodies lying in the snow in a disorderly manner. He threw his sword into the air, and it began to spin, gathering the wind and absorbing the blood from the bodies on the ground. The sword trembled with a steady thrum. Just a bit more, and its consciousness would be awakened. Dallas glanced at the bitter pond. It was calm and quiet. The water monkey is simple-minded. If we attack it at the same time, we can take it down. There's no need for us to take the risk, Sven said. The cultivators who ran away will be back. They'll handle it for us. You don't want to explore the pond before them? The authorities from the city didn't stay long. They probably already know what's down there. To begin with, it's suspicious how the city lords suddenly found clues to the treasury when none of us could. If you ask me, their goal was to lure us here. The fugitives had been bystanders during the day, watching Stephen and the guards from a distance. They hadn't tried to help the cultivators fight the water monkey. Flavius retrieved his sword and came over. After all the back-and-forth trouble of implementing rules, the authorities don't care if the cultivators sneak out of the city. Should we stick with our original plan and kidnap one of the city lords? Flavius and Sven preferred to use violence and resolve problems through force. They weren't that skilled at using their brains, but Dallas was different. I don't think the authorities know where the treasury is. If they did, why would they have waited all these years instead of breaking into it themselves? We need to approach this problem from another angle. Flavius and Sven looked at him expectantly. What's the plan? The mercenaries have guards stationed at the treasury, but they need some way to get the supplies to survive, Dallas explained. There's nothing around except the 4 cities. It's possible that they're working together with some of the wealthy families to transport resources secretly. If we look into their past transactions, we'll know what they're up to.